Well, let's all stand this morning as we celebrate being set free in Christ. Blind will see, through you the mute will sing, through you the dead will rise, through you our hearts will praise, through you the darkness flees, through you my heart screams, I am free, I am free, I am free to run. I am free to dance.
I am free to dance.
I am free to live for you.
I am free to live for you.
Yes, I am free.
I am free.
Yes, I am free.
Yes, I am free.
Through you the blind will see. Through you the mute will sing. The dead will rise, through you the hearts will praise, through you the darkness flees, through you my heart screams, I am free, I am free, I am free to run,
I am free to run.
I am free to dance. I am free to live for you.
I am free to live for you.
Yes, I am free.
I am free.
Yes, I am free.
Yes, I am free.
Yes, I am free to run.
I am free to run.
I am free to dance.
I am free to dance.
I am free to live for you.
I am free to live for you.
Yes, I am free.
I am free.
Yes, I am free.
Yes, I am free.
We'll wonder and all surround you, Lord. Glory and fire light your way. Day after day, the heavens proclaim the beauty of the Holy One. And we will respond with joy in our song. Your enemies rise, your enemies fall. Your fire consumes them all. Because there is none so high and holy. The King of Kings, the one and only. You are adored, because you are the Lord of all. The mysteries unknown are known to you. Our wisdom is yours to reveal. You hold in your hands the days of all men. You saw life and breath is yours. Your enemies rise, your enemies fall. Your fire consumes them all. God, there is none so high and holy. The King of Kings, the one and only. You are adored. Yes, you are the Lord of all.
We adore you. We adore you, Lord of all the earth. Lord, we love you. Lord, we love you. Let our hearts be pure, Lord. We adore you. We adore you, Lord of all the earth. Lord, we love you.
There is none so high and holy. The King of Kings, the one and only. You are adored. Yes, you are the Lord of all. There is none so high and holy. King of Kings, the one and only. You are adored. Yes, you are the Lord. You are adored. Yes, you are adored. Yes, you are the Lord. Yes, you are adored. Yes, you are the Lord of all. And maker of the heavens, and master of the seas, and mover of the mountains, and majesty, we glorify your name. We glorify your name. We glorify your name in all the earth.
Awesome God in power, author of my life, all consuming fire, alive, alive.
We glorify your name. We glorify your name. We glorify your name in all the earth. Sing that again. We glorify your We glorify your name. We glorify your name in all the earth. The highest praise. The highest praise is yours. The highest praise is yours. The highest praise is yours in all the earth. Just you all we glorify. We glorify. In all the earth, in all the earth. Me and Young BC, these are prayer hearts for communion. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Give life, you give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath. Let's all stand. In our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. One day every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. Just declare these words. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. And great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. And you can be seated. So, normally we dismiss you all at this point in the service, but the preacher is currently in Haiti, so we can do whatever we want.
Don't tell him we said that.
Don't tell him we said that. But he's in Haiti, so he can't reach us right now. So, usually when Will preaches, I usually say, what is the theme of your sermon going to be? And so this time he said, well, it's not on that screen yet, but it's
Kings.
a king. Yeah, so we tried to think of, we sang Christmas songs, We Three Kings. I was like, no, that won't fit because it's hot outside.
He wanted to do something from Lion King.
Lion King, yeah. La Cigüeña. But anyways, we tried several things, and we come to the conclusion we would do this one. You might have heard it before. If not, then you will this morning. And I used to rule the world. Seas would rise when I gave the word. In the morning I sleep alone. Sweep the streets that I used to own. And I used to roll the dice. Feel the fear in my enemy's eyes. Listen as the crowds would sing. Now the old king is dead, long live the king. Jerusalem bells are ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain, once you go there was never an honest word. But that was when I ruled the world.
It was the wicked and the wild wind blew down the doors to let me in. Shattered windows and the sound of drums. People couldn't believe what I'd become.
Hear Jerusalem bells ringing, Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries in a foreign field. And for some reason I can't explain, I know St. Peter won't call my name. but that was when I ruled the world. Hear Jerusalem bells ring, Roman cavalry choirs to sing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries in a foreign field. And for some reason I can't explain, I know St. Peter will call my name. That was when I ruled the world, and never an honest word, but that was when I ruled the world.
Good morning. Yeah, there we go. As has been mentioned already this morning, don't forget this week that Terry and his daughter Audrey, as well as Corey and Michelle Robinson and Kelsey New from Nineveh, they left church about 3 a.m. this morning to take a flight between 6 and 7 this morning that would take them down to Miami, which would then take them to Haiti for a 10-day mission trip. So please, we ask as a church that you would keep that group in your prayers this week as they serve in Haiti, as they reach the people there with the message of Jesus. So that being said, Haiti's blessed by Terry. You get me this week. I'm sorry. But this morning and next week also, because he'll be gone, we're going to take a look basically at one verse as the overall theme for what we're going to be doing and talking about the next 2 Sundays. So we're going to take a look at that idea. You already heard from Chad that this is kind of where the idea of the song came, and this is where we're going to be going with this theme. The idea of that whole song is there was a man who thought it would be best for him to rule and to be king, and then he realized what a problem that would actually end up being. And so today we're going to start with this verse, 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 5. And it's here on the screen. It'll be on the back of your bulletins as well for you to follow along with. This is the people of Israel talking to Samuel. Look, they told him, you are now old, and your sons are not like you. Give us a king to judge us Give us a king to judge us like all the other nations have. I'll make a confession this morning before we get back to our 1 Samuel passage. In October, I turned 30 years old. Right now, I know to some of you that's not very old. In fact, some of you, I'm looking around, are a whole lot older than I am. I didn't point any fingers. And I'll be 31 in about 5 months then. I realize that in the grand scheme of things, that's not very old. However, among some of my family and some of my close relatives and friends, I've been called an old man. For one reason, because of one thing I like to do, I will get the title old man. Even from my fiance here as of late, who sang up here this morning with them. And that is because I like to read the newspaper. Now, that may not seem like a big thing to you, but you'd be amazed at how many people think that's just an old person activity to read the newspaper. But I love it. I love to take it with me. I'll take it some weeks. Some days I'll buy one and I'll never get to read it. My mom asked me last week, do you ever actually open and read that thing, or do you just carry it around? That's all dependent upon the week and the way the day goes. But I love to be able to, sometimes I'll even just go to a restaurant by myself on purpose so that I can just sit and read and enjoy the newspaper. And in all of the paper, there is one part that is my very favorite and I look forward to the most. And that is the crossword puzzle. Now, you may have noticed that in your notes this morning, we're doing a crossword puzzle. It's because I'm preaching and I wanted to. I love to do the crossword puzzle. In fact, I like to get, especially on Monday, I like to get Monday's Lexington Herald Leader because it has the New York Times crossword puzzle. If any of you know anything about the New York Times, it starts easy on Monday and gets harder gradually throughout the week. So if the week is not too busy, which doesn't always happen, I'll finish Mondays, and I may even finish Tuesdays if it's a good week. And a couple times I've finished Wednesdays, but by the time Thursday and Friday comes, I'm lucky if I get a couple answers right, because it gets more difficult as it goes along. I'll go ahead, since I'm just on a admitting things spree this morning. You already think I'm a nerd. To tell you that one time I read in the paper that one of the Lexington Public Libraries was hosting a New York Times crossword puzzle tournament. And I thought, well, I can go do this. I took my Saturday to go and compete in this tournament. And let me tell you, I did terribly. I didn't hardly finish the thing. It was so bad. So in my Sunday school class last week, my college-age Sunday school class realized that I was preaching today. They jokingly said, instead of fill in the blanks, why don't you just do a crossword puzzle? And so that's what we've got this morning. You'll see on the back of your bulletin that as the notes go along, you will see that it tells you where to fill it in the crossword puzzle as we go along, and it'll be here to follow along as well. Here's the point, and the reason that we do this morning is this. I am usually so serious about my crossword puzzles. There are a lot of things I don't get that serious and fired up about, but I really enjoy doing it, and I'm pretty serious about it to the point that my family knows that if you want to help Will with the puzzle, you've got to ask Will first before you just step in and start solving problems. In fact, my fiancée, Emmy, has gotten to the point where a couple of times while I'm doing the crossword puzzle with her, she's figured this out, and so she'll ask me this question. If I know an answer, am I allowed to tell you what it is? That's very sweet to ask, by the way. To which I lovingly reply, I guess so. The truth is, I like to solve these crossword puzzles by myself. I like to do them without anybody else helping me. And maybe you're not a crossword nerd like I am, but you can probably understand the sentiment nonetheless. Think about it this way. Would you rather ask your coworkers for help on a big project at work, or would you rather first like to prove that you can do it all by yourself? Do you like it? Here's another example. Do you like it when your spouse jumps in to help you finish that card game or computer game or whatever it is that you're working on at the house in your free time, or would you rather do it yourself? How about this? Men, do you really want your wife pointing out that there are instructions to putting up that shelf or that entertainment center that you're putting together, or would you rather prove and show her that you're a man and you can do it all by yourself? I'm sorry about that, man. The truth is, we all have situations where we would just rather do it ourselves. No matter who's around, no matter what help is offered, sometimes we really would just rather prove that we're capable enough on our own to do it ourselves. And sometimes that's not a terrible thing, but sometimes we can be pretty stubborn about it. And if you'll take a look throughout the Old Testament and really study the people of God, the people of Israel, you'll notice a pattern of the very same thing with God's people. And it's the very first clue and the very first line in your notes this morning. It is this: 10 across is, God's people had a long history of solving their own problems. That's what we'll start with this morning. I've even got where to fill it in your blanks if you're not as good at these as I am. I'm just kidding. I'm really not that good. God's people, this is the point we'll settle on this morning. God's people had a long history, throughout their history, of trying to solve their own problems. We see it in the verse that we just read to begin the sermon with. Look at it again, and we're going to look at that same verse several times this morning. Again, 1 Samuel 8 and verse 5, this is Samuel speaking to the people, or the people of Israel rather, speaking to Samuel. He says, "Look," they told him, "you are now old, and your sons are not like you. Give us a king to judge us like all the other nations have." We're going to take a look at this verse, but let me first say that the problem with this verse is this. God's people came up with their own decision for the problem that they were facing. And that was what we see here in chapter 8, verse 5. We'll talk about that decision a little bit later, but we got to talk about the problem to begin with. God's people had a history of trying to solve their own problems. And the truth is, this in 1 Samuel was far from the first time that we saw that to be the case in the life of the Israelites, in the life of the nation of Israel. In fact, it goes as far back, and this is the next spot in your notes, it goes as far back as the time of Abraham. That's your 6 across clue. It goes as far back as Abraham. If you're here with us in March, or you know much about the story of Abraham, and we studied that a couple months ago, you know that he became the father of the people of Israel. And yet, as far back as the time of Abraham, before there is a united and great big nation that we called the people of Israel, as far back as the days of Abraham, we see this temptation to solve their own problems. Take a look at Genesis chapter 12, and we'll see that in the life of Abraham. We'll see an example of that this morning. Genesis 12, starting with verse 10 through 13. At that time, a severe famine struck the land of Canaan, forcing Abram to go down to Egypt, where he lived as a foreigner. As he was approaching the border of Egypt, Abram said to his wife Sarai, "Look, you are a very beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife. Let's kill him, and then we can have her. So please tell them that you are my sister. Then they will spare my life and treat me well because of their interest in you.'" You see, Genesis chapter 12, and maybe you were here when in March when we studied this particular passage of the life of Abraham. Genesis chapter 12 is one of the very first instances where Abraham's life is mentioned. At this point where we read, his name is still Abram. It's unchanged by the Lord as of yet. But right after, in Genesis chapter 12, we see God comes to Abraham, the very first revealing of himself to Abraham. He begins his covenant with him. He makes this covenant promise, "You'll be my people, I will be your God." And he sends him off, and Abram and Sarai, his wife, follow God into Canaan. But as soon as they do, they face a problem. There's a famine in the land of Canaan where they're living, and so they go down to Egypt. And we see in what we just read that they face yet another problem. Abram looks at Sarah, Abram looks at the people in Egypt, and he says, "You're too beautiful. They're going to want you. They're going to kill me so that they can have you. So let's instead tell them that you're not just, or that you're not my wife, but you are just my sister." And so we see the pattern beginning with Abram in Genesis chapter 12, beginning to take matters into his own hands, to try to solve his own problems. Now, when you look at that decision that they made in Egypt to deceive the people of Egypt to protect their own lives, does that sound like it's God's plan or Abram's plan? And the same is the case as we go throughout the life of Israel and their whole history from that point on. You see, God's people have had a long history of trying to solve their own problems. Back to your notes. The next line is this: even in the time of Moses. 3 across here is Moses. We see Abram, the father of the nation. Moses becomes the first really centralized leader of the people of Israel as they're coming out of Egypt. God brings them through Moses' hand out of Egypt, out across the Red Sea and into the desert where they're now at the mount called Sinai. And God brings Moses up on the mountain to give him the law that all the people of Israel would obey. But notice what happens to Moses. Notice what happens as Moses is up on the mountain with God. This is in Exodus chapter 32, the first 4 verses. It says, when the people saw how long it was taking Moses to come back down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron. Come on, they said, make us some gods who can lead us. We don't know what has happened to this Moses fellow who brought us here from the land of Egypt. And so Aaron said, take the gold rings from the ears of your wives and your sons and daughters and bring them to me. All the people took the gold rings from their ears and brought them to Aaron. Then Aaron took the gold, melted it down, and molded it into the shape of a calf. When the people saw it, they exclaimed, O Israel, here are the gods who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Now look at that decision as Moses is gone. Look at that decision on the people of Israel and tell me, does that seem like a God plan or an Israel plan? And so the case is the same as we go throughout the time of Moses. In fact, you want more proof that that's not God's plan? Take a look at what God does in verse 7 of chapter 32. The Lord told Moses, quick, go down the mountain. Your people who you brought from the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. How quickly they have turned away from the way that I commanded them to live. They have melted down gold and made a calf, and they have bowed down and sacrificed to it. They are saying, these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And then the Lord said, I have seen how stubborn and rebellious these people are. Now leave me alone so that my fierce anger can blaze against them, and I will destroy them. Then I will make you, Moses, into a great nation. After this passage, it takes Moses convincing the Lord before he finally relents and saves the people of Israel. All because the people of Israel faced a problem. Moses is gone. We don't know what to do without him. We're left without a leader. And they decided to solve their own problem in their own way. And it elicited the anger of the Lord. See, even after God delivers through Moses the people out of Egypt, it's no time at all before they're still falling back into that habit of trying to solve their own problems. So it goes from the time of Abram to the time of Moses to next, and this is next in your notes, all throughout the period of the Judges. All throughout the period of Judges is your next line. The next period in the history of the people of Israel, after Abraham, after Moses, after Joshua leads them, they enter into the promised land. They take the allotment of land that their tribes have been given, and they begin to be led throughout the book of Judges by the men and judges that God leads and raises up. Notice, though, what happens in chapter 2 of the book of Judges, and this is chapter 2 kind of serves as an overview of the whole book. Notice what it says. Verse 1, the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said to the Israelites, I brought you out of Egypt to this land that I swore to give your ancestors, and I said I would never break my covenant with you. For your part, you were not to make any covenant with the people living in this land. Instead, you were to destroy their altars. But you disobeyed my command. Why did you do this? So now I declare that I will no longer drive out the people living in your land. And notice what he says. They will be thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a constant temptation to you. Then look at what happens in verses 11 through 13 of the same chapter. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight and served the images of Baal. They abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. They went after other gods, worshiping the gods of the people around them, and they angered the Lord. They abandoned the Lord to serve Baal and the images of Ashtoreth. And if you studied that book of Judges, as some of us just did in this last small group session, you know that that becomes the very pattern of the entire book, and therefore the entire period of Israelite history, is that every time God delivers them, they get to the point where they face another problem, another people oppressing them, and once again they make another decision to try themselves and solve it. And eventually they spiral out of control, and they spiral further and further into sin and away from God. Because throughout the history of God's people, they kept trying to solve their own problems. You see it back in the time of Abraham, in the time of Moses, in the period of the Judges, and now, next note, even under the leadership of Samuel. Now under the leadership of Samuel, as we've read in 1 Samuel chapter 8 this morning, you see them doing the very same thing. See, the interesting thing is that after the time of Judges, when the people spiraled out of control and towards sin, Samuel becomes the first leader of the people of Israel. And Samuel really becomes the first leader in a long, long time that brings the people of God back to righteousness, who brings the people of God back closer to where they should have been all along. But then something happens, and we'll see, as we've seen already this morning in 1 Samuel chapter 8. Take a look at starting with verse 1, and we'll see more of what happens around this verse we've been looking at. 1 Samuel 8:1 says this: As Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons to be judges over Israel. Joel and Abijah, his oldest sons, held court in Beersheba. But they were not like their father, for they were greedy for money. They accepted bribes and perverted justice. Finally, all the elders of Israel met at Ramah to discuss the matter with Samuel. And here's verse 5 that we've seen already this morning. Look, they told him, you are now old, and your sons are not like you. Give us a king to judge us like all the other nations have. We're going to here's what I want to do this morning. I really want to examine that 5th verse of 1 Samuel 8 this morning for a few minutes. And as we do, we'll go through some of the rest of our notes. The next one is this. This was their demand. We want a what? King. It's pure and simple. We want a king, 8 down. That's what they asked him. That seems to be the big request here as they gather in front of Samuel as a people, as the leaders and elders of Israel at Ramah, Samuel's hometown. They say, we want a king. That is their demand. Take a look. 1 Samuel 8:5. Look at it again. We'll look at it 1,000 times. You are now old. Your sons are not like you. Give us a king. That's the demand that they asked for. You see, throughout the history of Israel, from Abraham to Moses and beyond, God had raised up centralized leaders for His people. He had raised up people like Moses and Joshua and the judges who would settle disputes and who would lead militarily and who would govern the people as a whole. But He had never yet appointed a king. To this point, the people of Israel had never had a God-appointed king to lead them. And yet, even though they never had a king themselves, they're pretty confident as they approach Samuel that day, that is their demand. That is what they need. Give us a king. The reason is your next line. And notice that word is in quotations. So we're going to say the reason they wanted a king that day is this. Samuel's sons did not follow God's ways. Samuel's sons did not follow God's ways. That looks like 5 down there in our puzzle. I hope you're still paying attention. You see, they come to Samuel. Look at the verse 5 again. Look at chapter 8, verse 5. Look, they told him, and this is the problem. This is the problem they present, the reason for wanting a king. Look, they told him, you are now old, and your sons are not like you. The writer of the book of Samuel tells us that when Samuel got old, he appointed Joel and Abijah, his sons, and immediately they became leaders unlike what Samuel had done. They did not lead in righteousness like their father. In fact, they were greedy. They perverted justice. They accepted bribes from the people. And so it seems like a suitable reason then that the people of Israel would come to Samuel at Ramah and say, give us a king because your sons aren't doing the job. Your sons aren't following in God's ways. But the more I study the life and the history of the people of Israel, both in this passage and also before and after, the more I start to think that maybe that wasn't the reason they desired a king. In fact, as we move on in our puzzle to, looks like 5 down, 2 down, you'll have the real reason. The other nations had kings. Comes down to it, I believe this is the reason. Not because of the way that Samuel's sons were leading, but because the other nations had kings themselves. Look again at verse 5. Look, they told him, you're now old, your sons are not like you. Give us a king to judge us like all the other nations have. Give us a king to judge us like all the other nations have. It seems to me in my study of this passage and in my study of the people of Israel that their real reason for wanting a king had to do with something other than their leadership. It had to do with the fact that everyone else and every other nation they saw had a king, and that's what they wanted as well. The irony here is that they ask Samuel to appoint a king, and their reason seems to be because his sons aren't leading the way his sons should be leading. And yet, instead of them seeking God to lead, instead of them seeking righteousness and seeking an answer from the Lord, what do? They make up a decision themselves. They come up with a better plan themselves. And so it convinces me that their goal was not righteousness, but their goal was something totally different altogether. So what was their real motivation for seeking a king? Well, all the other nations had kings. Parents, does that sound familiar? Why do you want to go? Because everybody's going to be there? Well, what are you wanting to do? Well, why do you want to do that? Because all my friends do. Why do you want that for Christmas? Because they've all got one. And so the Israelites are motivated in the same way. And this is one of our last clues in the crossword puzzle. Look at 7 down. This was Israel's temptation all along. This was Israel's temptation all along. You see, you think that this was the first time? Do you really think this was the first time that Israel decided as a nation to just mimic for themselves what they saw in the other nations around them? Then take a look at what Joshua says to the people of God before they enter into the land of Canaan, the land that will be their inheritance. Look at Joshua 24, verses 14 and 15. Joshua says, "So fear the Lord and serve Him wholeheartedly. Put away forever the idols your ancestors worshipped when they lived beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt. Serve the Lord alone. But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or will it be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live? But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." You see, if you think because they're the people of God, then there's only one God that they would serve, and there's only one choice for who Israel is going to serve and to follow, then you probably haven't read much of the Old Testament. Because the entire history of God's people consists of them having a choice. Either you will serve the Lord your God and receive His blessings, or you will choose to serve the other gods of the lands in which you're living. Joshua knew that was the choice. Joshua knew that that would always be their temptation. That as they saw the nations around them, they would start to adopt the ways and the practices of the people around them. In fact, the whole entire book of Judges is a series of events around which the people of God turn from God and make their own idols. They make their own gods and serve them in the ways of the pagan nations around them. They always had a choice. And guess what? When you solve your own problems, you generally end up choosing wrong. And most of their decisions seem to be based upon the simple fact that that's what they see from the nations around them. It seems like a pretty trivial thing. It seems like such an important decision that why would you just look to what the other nations have? Why not really make a important decision on this instead of looking and trying to be like everybody else? But I would venture a guess this morning that some of you are in the very same situation in your lives today. You claim to know God and you desire to follow Him in your life. But then you come face to face in your own life with a real problem. You lose your job, or you face a real crisis in parenting one of your children, or you're diagnosed with some disease. All real problems that many of us will face. And immediately you start seeking other solutions. You ask advice from your coworkers about what to do with your job. You read that great parenting book that somebody at work suggested that you pick up and read because it helped them. Or you take another appointment and get a second opinion from that doctor that your brother told you about that a friend of his went to see when he had the same thing. None of these are terrible things on their own. But what we're doing is we're looking in other directions for the solution we ought to be seeking God for. None of these things immediately sound like a bad idea. But what we're doing is when trouble comes, we look everywhere else except for where we ought to look. And let me ask you a question this morning. What about stopping first and seeing what your God would have you do? Or what if His solution to the problem was never for you to try and do anything? What if you were never supposed to do anything? What if that wasn't the point of the problem? What if the point of the problem was to see if you would trust in God or if you would trust in yourselves? And instead, we look everywhere else that we can. You don't know how many countless people I talk to, and they come into the office and talk to me, or they talk to Terry, and they do it under the guise of wanting advice, but you know what? They've already made their minds up. I think about somebody that came in, and they were seeking a divorce. And in this lady's mind, she had already decided what she was going to do. She wanted us to basically say that was the right way to go, was to divorce her husband. And you know why she had come to that conclusion? Because that's what her friends at work had advised her to do. These weren't godly people. These weren't people that were seeking after the advice and the wisdom of God, but we do it every day. And we end up in a place where we're convinced from outside sources of what we ought to do, when we ought to hit our knees very first and be convinced of what God wants us to do. Have you sought the decision by seeking the will of God? And if not, then what are we doing? What are we doing when problems come? When it comes down to it, here's the problem. And maybe you're asking it this morning. What's wrong with Israel wanting a king? What's wrong with us first trying to solve our own problems? In fact, that's what our society teaches us. With phrases like, just pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, right? You've made your bed, now lie in it, right? Deal with the decisions that you've made. You clean up your own mess. You fix things yourself. And we've conditioned ourselves to think that we ought to, if we're able to, solve our own problems. But that's not what God wanted. God desires for us to rely upon Him for each and every thing that we face. To rely upon Him to make those decisions, to seek His will first. What's the problem with Israel wanting a king? What's the problem with you and me trying to solve our own problems? It's this. God always desired to be the leader of His people. God always desired to be Israel's king. It wasn't that He would give Israel no king. It was that the original plan was that God and God alone would be their king. And it's the same thing for you and I today. God desires to be our leader. God desires to be our king, to be our sustainer, to be our provider, to be our protector, to be our healer, to be our God. And what are you and what am I doing when we decide to just make the decisions on our own? We're not allowing Him to lead in our lives. And so this morning, I'm going to ask Chad and the group to come out. And go back to the puzzle real fast. If you're waiting, maybe you're waiting to fill in the last one, get this whole thing finished, you're not going to. It's an unsolvable problem with no answer to the puzzle. And here's why. Because God never desired, God never intended for us to solve our own problems. That's not how He made it. That's not how He designed you or me to be able to solve our own problems. Do you know what I do every time I solve my own problem? I get myself in a bigger mess than I was in before. God desires for us to follow after Him. And you know what? I'm convinced that sometimes maybe those things happen in our lives as a way to see what we're going to do when they come. As a way to see whether you're going to follow God or you're going to follow what everybody else is doing and what best decision you can come up with from that. This morning, I understand that many of you are at that place. Many of you are at that place where you're facing problems. Maybe some of the same ones we just talked about. And you don't know what to do. And you're going to be tempted, as Israel was tempted, to find some other alternative on your own. To see what other people are doing, to see what other people are suggesting. Why would we follow people that aren't following after the will of God and take that as advice for what we ought to do? Seeking godly wisdom and counsel is one thing. But when these problems come, the best place to go is on our knees and seek the advice of Almighty God. And so that decision is yours. When those times come, it's up to you as to decide your own option, decide your own solution, or to let God solve it. Because as hard as we try, you and I don't have the answers. The question is not what best solution can we come up with. The question is, will we go to the one who has the answers? This morning, if there's a decision on your heart, I encourage you to seek God's will as we stand and as we sing.
We fall down, we lay our crowns at the feet of Jesus. The greatness of His mercy and love at the feet of Jesus. We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb.
We fall down, we lay our crowns at the feet of Jesus. Greatness of mercy and love at the feet of Jesus.
We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb. We fall down, we lay our crowns at the feet of Jesus. The greatness of His mercy and love at the feet of Jesus. We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb. We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb. Just one more time that you all. And we cry.
Father God, today that is our prayer.